You've seen the red jumpsuits. You know the Dali masks. You've definitely heard Bella Ciao. La Casa de Papel, or Money Heist as most of us know it, wasn't just a show. It was a global cultural event. But here's the thing. What if I told you its real origin is a secret? A story of near-total failure, absolute on-set chaos, and a wild, last-minute gamble that changed, well, everything.
And it all kicks off with this number. $2. No, seriously, $2. That is the symbolic and kind of unbelievable price that Netflix reportedly paid for the global rights to a show that was, for all intents and purposes, dead in the water. It was a bet that cost them basically nothing, and it ended up changing television as we know it.
See, before it became this worldwide sensation, La Casa de Papel was a straight-up commercial failure right in its home country of Spain. Yeah, a total flop. It's one of those classic stories, a local dud that becomes a global hit, but oh man, the details. That's where things get really interesting.
So when the show first aired on the Spanish channel Antena 3, it actually started off super strong. Over 4 million people tuned in for the premiere. They were probably thinking, we've got a hit on our hands. But then, disaster. Week after week, the audience just disappeared. The numbers literally got cut in half, dropping down to around 2 million viewers. The heist was falling apart, and it was happening fast.
And you can just feel the panic in the producer's own words. They literally said they were in a big crisis, just watching the show's value completely nosedive. It got so bad they had to scrap their original plan and actually shorten the series, just to cut their losses and get it over with. The whole project was sinking, and they knew it.
And that's when Netflix steps in with this just completely wild strategy. Okay, step 1. They buy the rights to this failed show for that symbolic $2. Step 2. They take the original 15 episodes and chop them up into 22 shorter, punchier episodes, perfect for binge watching. And then step 3, and this is the part that makes no sense, they release it to the entire world with zero promotion. I mean, nothing. No ads, no trailers, not a single billboard. So what happened? An absolute viral explosion. With no marketing budget at all, people just started discovering it thanks to the Netflix algorithm. It spread like wildfire purely through word of mouth. Think about that. In just 2 weeks, a show that was basically a reject in Spain suddenly became one of the most watched series on the entire planet. It's just incredible.
Okay, so that's the story of how it found its audience. But believe me, the story of how it was actually made is just as nuts. That sleek, perfect, meticulously planned heist you see on screen, it was basically an illusion. Behind the curtain, it was all just massive struggles and clever tricks.
For starters, let's talk about one of the biggest illusions, the locations. I mean, for obvious security reasons, they couldn't just roll up and start filming at the actual Royal Mint or the Bank of Spain. So that iconic Royal Mint building, that's actually the Spanish National Research Council. And the Bank of Spain they rob later on? Nope, that's the Ministry of Public Works. And get this, that secret Toledo estate where the professor lays out his master plan, it's a popular wedding venue, no joke.
And the onset challenges were just as wild. Remember that scene in the final season where they're melting gold underwater? The producers literally called it a nightmare. The fake gold props they were using, they started floating and bending under the water pressure. The whole set started to corrode. It was such a mess that the visual effects team had to go in and fix the gold frame by painful frame in post-production. The process was so awful, they apparently ended up hating the show. Can you blame them?
But the chaos wasn't just about props and locations. This is where it gets really mind-blowing. It turns out the show's entire emotional heart, the characters and relationships we all got so invested in, none of that was in the original plan. It was all basically born from pure accident and improvisation.
Okay, get ready for this, because this might be the single biggest secret of the entire series. That deep, complicated, incredible brotherhood between the professor and Berlin, it was never in the script, not a word of it. Originally, they were just written as two guys who knew each other. But the actors, Alvaro Morte and Pedro Alonso, had such insane chemistry off-screen that they just started improvising that connection. They even made up a whole backstory about traveling together to get treatment for Berlin's illness. They literally created that entire storyline themselves.
And it doesn't even stop there. Nairobi. Can you imagine the show without Nairobi? Well, you almost had to, because she wasn't in the original script either. The writers got pretty far into the process and realized, hey, we need another strong female character in this crew. The creator, Alex Pina, knew the actress Alba Flores from another project and basically wrote the part just for her, on the fly. And just like that, a fan-favorite character who completely changes the dynamic of the show was born from a last-minute phone call. And all this really makes you wonder, what were these actors bringing from their own real lives? And it turns out, a ton of depth. Alvaro Morte, our professor, he was an engineer before he was an actor, and he's a cancer survivor, which just adds this whole other layer to his character's journey. Pedro Alonso, the unforgettable Berlin, is a painter and a published author. Jamie Lorente, Denver, is a published poet. And Darko Peric, our beloved Helsinki, has a degree in veterinary medicine. I mean, these aren't just actors, they're these incredibly multi-talented people, and you can just feel how all that experience fueled their performances.
So you have a show that was literally born from chaos, but its impact, its impact went way beyond the screen. It's like the show spilled out into the real world, and its symbols and its music accidentally became this global language for actual protest and resistance.
Let's start with Bella Ciao. That song is so much more than just a catchy tune. It wasn't picked at random. The creators very specifically chose this historical Italian folk song, which was the anthem for the anti-fascist resistance fighters back in World War II. And by having the professor learn it from his grandfather, they weren't just telling a story about robbing a bank. They were framing the entire heist as an act of rebellion, a legacy of fighting back against the system.
I mean, the journey that song has been on is just wild. Think about it. It starts with Italian resistance fighters in World War II. Then, because of the show, it becomes this massive pop hit all over Europe in the summer of 2018. And from there, it evolves into a real-world protest anthem used by people all over the globe. That's some serious power.
And it wasn't just the song, right? The show's whole look crossed over into reality. Those red jumpsuits and the surreal Salvador Dalí masks, they became this instant universal symbol for fighting back. You started seeing them everywhere, from festive carnivals in Rio all the way to serious political protests in places like Turkey. The fiction of the show had literally become a uniform for real-world resistance.
And all of this brings us to the show's biggest, most beautiful irony. Here you have a story that's all about a perfect, flawless, meticulous plan, but the show itself was the complete opposite. It was a product of constant improvisation, near total failure, and just this beautiful, messy, wonderful imperfection right up until the very final scene.
Even the finale itself was born from pure chaos. The creator, Alex Pina, he flat out admitted that they had an ending all planned out, but at the very last minute they looked at it and went, "This doesn't work." He called the whole situation a complete absurdity, staring down the barrel of disappointing 100 million subscribers. So what did? They rewrote the entire finale over and over, finally landing on the perfect ending just days before it was due.
So when you really break it all down, the anatomy of this massive hit, it's this incredibly complex recipe, right? Sure, part of it is the brilliant plan we see on screen, but it's just as much about the characters that were born from pure chemistry, the production chaos they somehow managed to survive, the powerful symbols that just clicked with people everywhere, and that historical music that gave the whole thing a soul.
Which really just leaves us with one final thought. For a show that was all about celebrating a flawless, perfect plan, it seems like its real, lasting magic actually came from all the things that went wrong. The improvisations, the lucky breaks, the happy accidents. So it really makes you wonder, was the show's true strength in its perfect plan, or was it in its perfect chaos?